assume that this is one of your favorite coffee spots here in Bangkok, right?
It is, it is. I love Thai food, of course, most Australians do, but I'm not so great at it for breakfast time. So for brunch or breakfast on a weekend, I often come here and have a flat white, some good brekkie, as we would say in Australia, read the paper or magazine and check my messages on my phone like a good Thai, and really enjoy my weekend.
Right, and when we think of Australia, we would often think of its coffee culture, and it's quite similar to Bangkok as well. So do you feel the same way?
It is. Actually, most often in a cafe here, the people who make the best flat whites are people who are Australian alumni and who might have worked in a Melbourne or a Sydney cafe. So it's always great to meet people who've studied in Australia and who've experienced the culture in Australia. And a flat white is, Australians and New Zealanders both claim it as their own, but it's quite an Australian way to start the day. So that's my coffee of choice.
So let's order some flat white for today.
Sure, we can do that here. So I'll have my usual, which is an extra hot flat white, please. And
I'll have flat white as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Cheers.
this is authentic Aussie flat white.
A very Australian flat white, this one. Yeah.
So we just ordered flat white, and normally flat white has 3 layers, so coffee, milk, and milk foam. So how would you describe the 3 layers to your work or your diplomacy?
Such an interesting question. I haven't thought of it like that before, but it's an appropriate question given we're here with our coffee. I'd say probably 1 layer is Australia, 1 layer is Thailand, and then the 3rd layer is people. And so much of what we do in diplomacy is making connections between people, helping understand Thailand and Thai culture through its people, and conveying that to Australia, representing the Australian people here. So I think that mix of those 3 is probably my closest analogy to the flat white.
Right, and people is like the most important layer as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So since you've been here for about 2 years and a bit already, so what have you done so far in terms of raising the awareness between Thailand and Australia in terms of the bilateral relations?
Well, I was fortunate to arrive just after quarantine ended, and once the borders opened after COVID in both directions between Thailand and Australia. So some of it has been a natural evolution, really. Tourists coming back into Thailand, a lot of tourists, which is great from Australia. Students from Thailand going to Australia. So facilitating those movements, helping those connections sort of regenerate, I suppose, after some of the darker COVID years when there was so much isolation, has been a key part of it. I think also the really consolidation of our trade and economic relationships. So I know your Prime Minister talks a lot about needing trade and investment to really improve the living standards and prosperity of the people of Thailand. And our Prime Minister and ministers talk in much the same way. And we know as Australia that so much of our prosperity depends on Southeast Asia. And so it's such a natural partnership between Australia and Thailand in trade and investment.
Right, and recently Prime Minister Sethar was at the ASEAN-Australia Summit. So how will this foster the relationship between Thailand and Australia in terms of trade?
We were really pleased to welcome him to Melbourne. This year is the 50th anniversary of Australia being the first dialogue partner of ASEAN. So this was a commemorative summit with all of the leaders of the Southeast Asian countries in Melbourne. And as part of that, there was a lot of talk and reinvigoration of the trade and economic relationship. Our Prime Minister has picked up some recommendations from Southeast Asia Economic Engagement Strategy that was presented to him by Nicholas Moore, Australia's Special Envoy for Investment in Southeast Asia. And so made some announcements about increasing investment, for example, a $2 billion fund for Southeast Asia infrastructure, which will be a mix of loans and grants and insurance. So not perhaps what we had done 30 years ago. People might remember the Thai-Laos Friendship Bridge, which just turned 30. I was just up in Nong Khai for the 30th anniversary, and that was the first connection along the Mekong River, and Australia funded that bridge back then to the tune of about 42 million Australian dollars, and helped build that first bridge across the river. So 30 years ago, that was the sort of economic investment in Southeast Asia. Today, it's a little bit different. It's often about expertise, capacity building, services, and this sort of investment facility. So a bit of a change.
And what sort of changes do you hope to see in terms of the economic relations between the two countries?
Well, TAFTA, the Thailand-Australia Free Trade Agreement, is one of our oldest, and the last tariff reductions under that come into effect next year. So that's been really successful in terms of increasing trade in both directions. But I think there's a lot more we can do that's not just beef coming from Australia into Thailand, or seafood coming from Thailand into Australia. Motor vehicles, it's a big export from Thailand into Australia. So there's that trade between our countries, which is really important. But there's a lot more sort of economic integration that we can talk about. So the Australian FinTech Association just signed an MOU with its Thai counterpart a couple of weeks ago, looking at really innovative finance mechanisms, and Bangkok is of course a real hub for tech startups, and so it was linking those businesses with Australian businesses so that they can become slightly more than startups and really embed themselves in the economy. So it's a real evolution in how we can think about trade and economic integration between our countries.
It is really interesting because nowadays people are placing more importance about new technologies, and especially with the emergence of artificial intelligence or AI as well. So how will this actually accelerate this relationship in terms of economic and fintech and all these things?
I can't claim to be an expert in AI yet, although I'm going to have to be, I think, because it's clearly something that is going to change the way we do business and the way we communicate and the way we interact. So it's here to stay, and I do need to get across the detail of AI.
I think everyone is trying to get the hold of AI and everything.
I think so. But I think the platforms, whether it's the digital platforms or the capacity building, how we might think about regulation and policies around that. For example, e-safety and the safety of children online and how they might have access to certain materials or not. I think with AI, it's a great example. There's the business relationship, there's the potential for innovation and collaboration between our companies, but there's also the policy discussions that so many of us are having to deal with, and we don't have all the answers. But when it comes to child safety online, for example, or addressing some of the potential harms around child sexual exploitation, there's some really concerning aspects of this modernisation, which we work closely through our Australian Federal Police, for example, with Thai police and others to try and address and contain. So I think across a whole range of aspects of our relationship, we work closely with Thailand.
Right, and talking about the relations between Thailand and Australia, we seem to be really successful in terms of economic, tourism, and also in terms of education. But are there any other sectors that you want to focus more?
I would like to mention the defence relationship. Of course, many people may know that His Majesty studied in Australia. He went to military college in Duntroon in the early 1970s, and I know it was 1972. And this year is our 72nd year of our diplomatic relations, and of course an auspicious year in terms of His Majesty's 72nd birthday. It's an important reminder of our military relationship and the military training that we have, including Thais who continue to train in Australia every year and go to staff college and other military training colleges. So both in training, in exercises, and in working together, that's a really important part of the relationship. And I'd just like to mention there our collaboration in Timor-Leste, really helping Timor become an independent country. Australia had the command of the UN forces there, and then subsequently handed that to a Thai commanding officer, and Australians worked for the Thai command in helping a fledgling Timor-Leste gain its independence. So a long tradition of working together in the military as well. And we continue to have training, exercises, collaboration. For example, we will host this year with Thailand, as we do every 2 years, exercise Pirap Jabaru, which is a peacekeeping training exercise. So Thailand, Australia and other countries working to make sure we can operate together in the peacekeeping context. So it's a very long-standing military and defence relationship, but one that's really relevant today as well. Australia is really pleased to support Thailand's Counter-Trafficking in Person Centre of Excellence. This comes from an MOU that was signed by our foreign ministers in 2022, and it's really a Thai initiative, which is great to see, and Australia is providing some support and capacity building, but to bring together all of the elements across government who need to deal with the scourge of human trafficking, whether it's victim protection, whether it's prosecutions, investigation, identifying how this crime type is committed and really trying to address that. So it's not a pleasant subject matter, but it's a really important one that has direct impacts on vulnerable humans, men and women, both in terms of labour, trafficking, exploitation, sometimes sex trafficking and trafficking of children. So as I say, it's not at all a pleasant subject matter, but it's a really important area of cooperation. So
yeah, and when we're talking about like human trafficking, it's still a very complicated issue. So how do you see the challenges in terms of tackling human trafficking, especially the ones that are cross-border?
I think it's exactly as you say. It's a very complex issue. Any journey has perhaps a spectrum of how people are dealt with. Sometimes it might be smuggling, sometimes there's trafficking components. It's really the deprivation of freedom and deprivation of choice for these people, and it's really limits people. It's such a cruel and degrading way of treating people as if they're just cargo and trying to exploit them for other people's purposes. So to try and address that, and I said before, it brings government together. It also brings together private, not-for-profit, people who are supporting, particularly in terms of the victim protection, which is one of the key principles that Australia supports in addressing trafficking. So the investigation and the prosecution is, of course, incredibly important, but it has to be done in a way that's sensitive to those who are the victims of this, really terrible crime.
Right, and since you've been here for many years already, what do you think has been the biggest accomplishment in terms of the bilateral relations between the two countries?
I think we signed quite early, not me personally, but quite early in my time here, our foreign ministers signed the joint plan of action under our strategic partnership, and that brought together a lot of activities that were going along across all these different lines of effort and really provided a framework for us to focus on our future collaboration. So in an architecture sense, as we sometimes say in diplomacy, the framework of the relationship, that was really important, as is our strategic economic cooperation arrangement. But I think it's the day-to-day interactions, the growth of student numbers of Thais coming to Australia, tourists coming here. Those day-to-day collaborations are the ones that are really meaningful.
Right. Now let's talk a bit more about the people between Australian people and Thai people, because you just mentioned how people are so important in terms of bilateral relations. So what do you think is the main similarities in terms of the culture and the traditions between Australian people and Thai people?
I'd like to say that we're both quite a friendly people, and we're easy to open up to, easy to engage. So I think that that really contributes to being able to talk and understand each other well. I know that Thailand is the land of smiles, but I think often Australia is also seen as friendly and accessible, and I think that works really well so that we can get straight to the heart of matters with each other. I think that works well.
Right, because Australia is like a very culturally diverse society as well, with Australian people coming from different cultural backgrounds as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. So a multicultural society, lots of Thais in Australia actually, and there's Thai restaurants are very popular, and indeed I would say that pad Thai might almost rival the flat white as a favourite Australian dish. So people have Thai food quite regularly, to both Thais and non-Thais, and so there's a lot of those links that continue for sure.
Many Aussies love Thai food to begin with as well, right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe pet glang.
Pet glang.
Pet glang.
Okay. So you've learned a lot of Thai words since you've been living here, right?
I did do a little bit of language training before I came to Thailand. So Dishin Pud Pasa Thai Nid Noi Ka.
Okay.
But it's quite a difficult language to learn, so I do speak some Thai, but it helps understand the culture and to engage with people and to have some conversations, especially out of Bangkok, when I visit the provinces and able to talk directly with Thais.
Is there like a favorite word that you like to use, or is there like a phrase that you use very often when you speak Thai?
That's a good question. Sometimes set lao.
เสร็จแล้ว
Yeah, are we done yet?
Yeah.
Seems to be one of those, but and I do like jing jing lao as well.
จริงๆแล้ว okay.
Yeah.
So like,
Was that pronunciation okay?
Yeah, จริงๆแล้ว yeah.
Jing jing lao.
Yeah, but I think there are a lot of words that many people pick up, and it also reflects the Thai culture and hospitality as well, right?
Absolutely, and I think for me, there's no real Thai word for no. So you don't just say no to something, you might say my chor or...
So like an indirect way of saying no.
Right, yeah, rather than a more direct way that there is in English, for example.
So from your perspective, how is living in Bangkok different from living in Sydney or Canberra?
Even Sydney is different to living in Canberra, but Bangkok is, I love Bangkok. It's there's a certain ramshackleness about the city from time to time, but I think that's really part of its charm. So there are gardens and small pockets of greenery everywhere. I love that. I love that people are generally welcoming. People go about their business, but are considerate of other people. There's nothing you can't get here in Bangkok in terms of whether it's food or anything that you might be missing from home. You can always find a way to have it here, and I think the way culture and religion that is part of the everyday Thai way of living is really apparent in Bangkok, and that's really lovely.
Right, but is there any part of Bangkok that reminds you of Australia?
I don't think in a streetscape sense, but then I find pockets of cafes, for example, like this. So the Australian brunch culture has well and truly taken hold here, and you can get a flat white and a smashed avocado on toast in a lot of places in Bangkok. So there are moments where I feel very at home, but I also love what's different about Bangkok compared to Australia.
Right, and what are the main differences from your perspective?
I think that open recognition of religion, the shrines, the ancestor shrines and the spirit shrines on lots of street corners, and the way people participate in some of the rituals of Buddhism on a daily basis. I think that's really a kind part of the Thai cultural tradition. Just the sheer numbers of people. It's a very big city, especially compared to Canberra, which is much, much smaller. It's a very different feel. It's a great vibrancy to the metropolis of Bangkok.
How has the interest about Thailand increased among Australians?
I think Australians have always been fond of Thailand.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of people who've travelled here, not just once, but sort of year or every couple of years, and enjoy the beaches and the beach resorts of Thailand, but also many families who come love visiting Chiang Mai or Chiang Rai and seeing something of the northern part of Thailand, as well as spending time in Bangkok. So I think Australians are very fond of Thailand and are quite familiar, having visited regularly. So there's a strong affection for Thais and for Thailand in Australia.
What about our Thais' perception of Australia? How has it changed over the years?
I think perhaps the fact that a million people from Southeast Asia call Australia home, and that sense of multicultural Australia that you were talking about before, that so much of Southeast Asian culture more broadly, is now present and part of everyday life in Australia. That sometimes surprises people who might not have been to Australia for a while.
Right, and what have you been doing so far to promote the cultural exchange between Australia and Thailand?
Well, I find the alumni in particular are great promoters of Australia here. So there are a couple of institutions of dance teachers, for example, ballet and other classical and lyrical dance, who have great connections with Australia. And so I've been to a couple of their presentation ceremonies, watching young Thais, mostly girls, but girls and boys, participating in dance competitions. And so some of those connections are really long-standing, and it's great to be a part of those still.
This dance culture is really interesting because not many people know about this dance culture in Australia, right?
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So it's fun to be part of, and at both events I've been to recently, there are Australian adjudicators and some Australian teachers, and they were blown away by the quality of the Thai dancers, who were really technically beautiful, but also had a lot of expression as well. And that's just in sort of modern form of dance. Of course, then there's Thai traditional dance, which is, a lovely addition to that broader dance tradition.
Right, and for this year, are there any other events or activities that we can watch out for in terms of like promoting the cultural exchange between Australia and Thailand?
Well, we participate in a number of events through the year. So Bangkok Design Week, and we'll take some of that collaboration to the Isan Festival actually in Khon Kaen, which will be fun to go out of Bangkok with that. I think we will participate as an embassy, and many Australians participate in the Pride Parade in June, which is a vibrant part of Thai culture, and great for Australians to participate and really recognise the contribution of LGBTQI people. And I know that Thailand is bidding for World Pride in 2028, and Sydney hosted that last year, so we've made sure that the organisers are in touch with each other, so that's always a fun part. It's not, we don't have a lot of shared sporting traditions between our two countries, but I think we'll be looking forward to the Olympics in Paris, for example, and watching different Thai and Australian competitors in that as well.
And when we talk about sports, then what kind of sports that we can promote a lot more between Australia and Thailand?
I think it's the participation in sport, which is great. So of course there's elite level sport, and we admire the people who are able to do that to such a great degree. And of course Muay Thai boxing here is incredible. You might not know that Matthew Dean is Australian.
Yes.
So I think he's a great Australian export to Thailand. So there's that elite level sport, which is great. But I think it's also the participation of both boys and girls in different sorts of sports, which is great. Last year we had some representatives from our Football Federation of Australia here running some workshops and clinics with some of the young female footballers, and that was ahead of Australia hosting the FIFA Women's World Cup last year, which Thailand didn't participate in, unfortunately, but I know there's a strong commitment from the Thai Football Federation to supporting and promoting women's involvement in sport as well as football more broadly. So plenty of avenues for cooperation there.
Yeah. And one last question, what would be the most memorable part of the diplomacy between Australia and Thailand?
Oh, I think the points that keep coming up are His Majesty's military college training at Duntroon, the Thai-Lao Friendship Bridge, the Timor cooperation, and the number of Australian tourists here in Thailand and Thai students into Australia, that constant mix of people coming back and forth with each other. So I think those are the ones I'd point to.
All right, thank you so much for today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
ขอบคุณมากค่ะ
ยินดีค่ะ